Okay, so this is a cutting head off of an Eclipse. It's an Eclipse Pro because it has a servo motor on it with an encoder on the back. It has some problems. This is an older cutting head because it has a white blade step and a white V-groove switch, and it has the old style two-piece mat foot. So we're going to upgrade this as well. So the problem with this cutting head, one of them, is the slider pin is broke. This should not move like this. So we're going to fix that. So let's start. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to turn it around, and we're going to take off these 4 screws and split the cutting head. So this takes an 1/8 inch Allen wrench. I use these nifty 3-inch Allen wrenches with a socket driver that works on my socket wrench. Okay, so now that I have those 4 screws out, I can pull it apart like this. In here is the coupling that holds the air cylinder to the push rod. That's going to take a 1/2 inch open end wrench and a 5/16 open end wrench. There are flats on this part right here, so we just break those apart. And then I can hold this with my wrench and I can unscrew it, turning the cutting head. So now I've got that taken apart. So we're going to set this aside. This is the pinion gear. This is the home sensor. This home sensor looks for this set screw to pass by it, right in front of it, for the homing routine. Okay. So now let's take this end apart. So this is the blade clamp. Taking the blade clamp off, you can see that this slot is damaged. It's not going to hold the blade well. So we're going to replace this part, which is called the slide block, with a new one. Right there, that's the slide pin, the slider pin that's broken. That is a 9/64 Allen wrench. So I'm just going to take that out. It's broken. It should look like this. But you can see the bottom part of it is broken off. So we're going to need to use that. Okay, 3/32 Allen wrench on the side. So let's do that. So there's a screw on this side, 3/32. All you have to do is loosen it. You don't have to take it out. 3/32 here, loosen that. Okay, now this should come off, but it's not right now because the remainder of that pin is stuck in there. So I have to come around to this side, and I have to take this spacer off. So I'm turning the foot around while I'm holding this part with my wrench. This is a little snug, so there's been some thread damage or something to it, but that's all right, we'll fix it. So this is the nut spacer. It's a nut and a spacer. That's why it's called a nut spacer. So now we're going going to try and get this off. There we go. So now that's off. And this came out. This is the push rod, and it is nasty. It hasn't been serviced in a long time. And there's the broken piece off of the pin. So throw that away, get a rag, and so I use a product called Lift Off, Morton's Bocker Lift Off. You can get it at Home Depot in the paint section. You can get it at True Value, Menards. Most places have it in the paint section, but it is an adhesive remover and grease remover, and it is really good. This cutting head has been assembled incorrectly because this spacer washer is going to hit against that O-ring, and it's going to jam that bearing up in there. This should be on the outside of the spacer. So clean all the grease off of everything. Now we can take this gear, call this the big gear, and take this out. That shaft is nasty. Clean all this grease off of here. There's another spacer washer right there. You can just take that spacer washer off and set it aside for right now. Okay, there's a spring inside of here. You just put something in there and pull that spring out. It's got grease on it. It needs to be cleaned off. So there you go. Oops, didn't get it all. There we go. Alright, we're going to squirt this down with the degreaser. Use a toothbrush, clean all the teeth out. You might have to do this a couple of times. The Morton's Bocker Lift Off. It's like the best stuff. I've tried Goo Gone, I've tried everything, and it is far superior to all those. Okay, so now we need to clean inside the shaft, and inside the shaft this way there is a spacer right about here in the middle, that so we can't go all the way through, we have to go from both ends. So I use the half sheet of paper towel and twist it up. Just kind of thread it in there, jam it in there, keep turning and pushing until it hits the spacer, and pull it out again. This end will have the most garbage in it because of the grease on that shaft. You can see some of it's coming out of the side. Nasty. Okay. Now we're going to clean all the grease that's in here out, and we're going to run a paper towel down through that bearing because this bearing has got nasty black lubricant in it. Do not spray a cleaner on those bearings. They have oil impregnated in them, and they're designed to weep the oil out when they get hot, and then as they cool down they suck the oil back in. You can take these screws out too if you need to, if they're in your way. These are the screws that hold the head cover on. Somebody put a sign on their cutting head to tell which way to adjust the stops. This person sent it to me with the hinges attached. Don't do that. Keep the hinge with your machine. That way it doesn't get lost. Well, at least they sent part of the hinge, really. The other 3 pieces and the hinge pin are missing. You can wear gloves when you're doing this. You generally don't. This has got ATG tape all over the bottom of it. So I might take a razor blade and do a little scraping just to make sure. It looks like it's clean enough. Okay. Now I'm just going to take this dry rag and twist it up and kind of stick it in this bearing and clean it up. If you can see, it's kind of in the bearing right there. I can reach in there with a pair of needle nose pliers and pull it through till it's tight. Yeah, now those are nice and clean in there. Okay, so we'll set that aside. Let's clean off this pinion gear while we're at it. Get most of the grease with the paper towel. Clean the teeth with the degreaser and the toothbrush. So this is the swivel coupling. It's designed to swivel around. It's got to be lubricated too, but when you, like if you push or pull on it really quickly, you don't want to feel any play on it, but you also want it to spin freely. So there's a fine adjustment to that. Alright, so there's that. Now, the way this works, spring goes in here. We're going to lubricate it, but I'm going to put it in right now clean. This is your plunger. You can see the plunger has a machined end, a flat spot with a hole drilled through it at an angle. The slider pin goes in here. And it's called a slider pin because as this plunger moves in and out, the screw slides in and out. Now that screw goes in this hole, and if you can look in there, maybe you can see that pin down inside there. So as this moves back and forth, you can see how that pin moves. So the thing most people have a problem with is getting this in there connected to that. And I'll show you how to do that. It's not too difficult. Alright, so if I'm going to put this part back together, I'm going to use this grease, Loctite. It's a really nice grease. You can get it at Fastenal stores. You can order it on the CMC Doctor website. A little bit on my finger. I'm going to put it in the hole, and then I'm going to smear it all over this part of the shaft like this. Okay, it is really slick stuff. Slick as in slippery. I'm going to take a little bit more, put it between my finger and thumb, and I'm just going to put it on this spring like so. Put that spring in there like that. This has flats on this end, so I'm going to lube up the round end of it, and then I'm going to put this on here. But before I do, see there's the flat spot right there. I'm going to stick this slider pin in it just to hold it so it won't spin around while I'm trying to tighten this nut on here. Oops. So I want to leave about a 1/4 inch of threaded rod sticking out right there. Now this is under spring load, so when I push on it, it springs back. Okay? So that's all put together. So we'll just set that aside for right now. Let's fix this part. So this is the business end. This is the complicated part. First thing we're going to do is take off this mat foot. This design is being replaced. This 2-piece design is being replaced with a 1-piece design. There are 2 grooves which are machined into the back side. They are wear indicators. If you wear this down to the first groove, and if you cut 8-ply mat board, you should change this. If you only cut 4-ply mat board, you could actually go down to the second groove, but I recommend replacing it at the first groove. So we're going to take this off. 5/64 Allen wrench. This part is a 2-piece assembly. We don't need this anymore. Okay, so now we got our slide block. So this is a 1.5 millimeter Allen screw. So see how I can move this back and forth to expose this screw. Take that apart. Was kind of tight and stripped, so I can push that over there now. Take these off. So there's 3 set screws right here that you don't have to do anything with right now, but they'll become important later. So now that I've got those 6 screws out, this will just come off. And these are your bearings. So this is the very important part right here. This is called the bearing element. Those can get damaged and broken. They're available on the CMC Doctor website. This piece here, we're not going to use anymore. It's no good. So we're going to replace it with this new one. Now, some features. So on this old style, you can see that there's a space between the edge and this pin. I've moved this pin right over next to this edge so the blade can't flip up and out of the slot and tear this corner up as easily. So if you look at this one, there's the edge of the slot right there, right up next to that pin. Okay, so now the blade can't slide because there's no place for it to go. That pin's holding it in place. This is the blade depth stop, so the blade goes in until it touches that. This particular one has a 2, a 4, and an 8 ply step. So when the blade is in the slot, it exposes just enough blade to do the job. I move it over here, I put it up against the stop, and it exposes a little more blade. I move it over here, and I get more blade. So that's how this one works. On the new one, if I put this in and I've got it all the way over there, there's no more. The 2 ply step is here, but you can't use it. You don't really need it. So there's a 4, 6, and 8 ply. So this is the 4 ply step. If I put it over here onto the next step, that's the 6 ply step. Exposes more blade. If I put it over here on the 8 ply, it exposes more blade. So the only difference between the red one and the white one is, if you're used to using the middle step here for 4 ply, you got to rethink things. This has got to be all the way over to this side for 4 ply. Okay? This is your depth screw. I don't Loctite. I Loctite this in, but I don't do it in the kit until I'm done, until I have it all assembled. This is the white V-groove switch. It is higher on this side right here. There's a higher part, and so when the depth screw comes down and hits, it hits the high part for V-grooving. It hits the low part for cutting. So V-grooving is all the way over here, cutting is all the way over here. We're going to replace this with a new one that's blue. And you can see the high part and the low part. So I'm just going to replace that right now. So this takes a 50 thousandths 050 Allen wrench. And there is a spring and a ball bearing behind here, so I'm holding the white piece with my fingers while I take this screw out. And then when I take this off, you see there's the ball bearing and the spring. Okay? So now we're going to put the blue one right back on top of it. But first I'm going to clean this whole thing, so I'm just going to tip that screw and spring out. Sometimes there's another ball bearing in there behind that spring, so it's ball, spring, ball. In this one it's just spring and ball. So let's get this cleaned up. Again, I'm using the Mortensbacher, taking all the grease and dirt, and tape. It's got something white in here. I'm just using a dull blade kind of as a scraper to get in there and get that garbage out of there. Make sure the grooves in this bearing are cleaned out. Just use the tip of a blade and get in there and drag all the dirt that's in the grooves out. Okay. So now we'll put that spring back in the hole. We'll put that little ball bearing right on top of the spring. We'll put this, see this has got two little détentes in the middle. That's where the ball bearing runs. So you put that down on top of there. And then you hold it. Oops, sorry, I messed up. The little ball bearing jumped out of there. Come here. Oops. Alright, so there's the ball bearing. Alright. This is blue Loctite, not red. Do not use red. Not on little screws. Just put a little bit of blue Loctite on there. There's a long screw and a short screw. The long screw goes in the tall side. Remember, it's a 50 thousandths Allen wrench. Come on. Sometimes things just don't go the way you want. Where'd that little guy go? Get up on there. This screw's going in kind of snug. I may want to clean that hole out. I think I'm gonna do that. So we'll take a break while I clean that hole out with a little tap. Hang tight. Okay, so tech support calls are out of the way. So now I'm going to use a little tap, a 440 tap, to clean out these holes. So I'm just going to run the tap in carefully. Don't like cross thread it, you know, make sure that it goes in the existing threads. Run it down until it bottoms out. And then turn it back. It'll take out any Loctite or dirt or goop. There you go. So now I got those holes cleaned out. So now we're going to put the spring in. So we're going to put the spring in there. And we're going to set the little ball bearing on top of the spring. And then we're going to take the blue V-groove switch. And there's two little indentations right at the end of my thumbnail. that are where the ball bearing goes. So we're gonna put that on top of there, push down. Now we've got it captured. So then we'll take a screw, the longer of the two, put a little blue Loctite on it. Don't use red on small screws. Red is for big screws. And run it down in there and do the little screw. I use a gel type Loctite instead of the liquid, because the liquid will smear out and it will lock up your switch. So all you need to do is put those down until they touch, and then you need to make sure that this moves back and forth. If you make it too tight, it won't move. So then you just turn it back just a little bit. That's how you do that. Okay. So now you have to inspect the bearing elements and make sure they're clean. These are very delicate, so be very careful with them. Lay one on this side. Oops. Lay that in there like that. So now this is the bearing race. You see this side has a tapped hole and this side has a clearance hole. The clearance hole goes down. So it goes with the tap side up like that. Okay? And then we tip it over. Put this bearing element on there. Again, tapped side up, not the clearance side. So that goes on there like that. Okay, so I'm holding those. They can move back and forth like that. So I'm going to take the slide block and I'm going to make sure that's all clean, and I'm going to slide that on top of those bearings just like that. Okay, and then my 1.5 Allen wrench, I might have to push on the bearing to get it in the right location so I can see down in there and I can see the tapped holes line up. And then I take the little screws, put them back in. Do not tighten them, just put them in loosely. Just loose. Move that over so you can get to that hole. Just loose. Okay, so we've got these screws in and they're kind of loose. You'll see this wobbles. See that wobble? We don't want that wobble. To get rid of that wobble, we have to tighten these 3 set screws. They're very small, and so is the little Allen wrench. It's a 0.9 millimeter Allen wrench. And we start with the middle one, and we hold, and I get the Allen wrench in the hole here, and then hold the cutting head so you can move it, and you want to tighten this screw until you feel the bearing kind of get grindy, and then you want to back it up just a little bit, ever so much off of that, so it's smooth. And then you want to repeat the process with each of the other screws. Tighten it up till it gets grindy, and then loosen it up until the grindy part goes away. You might have to repeat it a couple of times. Same thing with the back screw. Okay, now once I've got those adjusted, I tighten these screws up with my 1.5 millimeter wrench. And so I just snug them up. You don't have to get really tight. Just snug them up. Okay, and now this should fall down by itself. It looks like I need to adjust it a little bit. See how it's sticking up there? I don't want it to stick up there. I want it to fall down without any help. So let's go back and redo this a little bit. So I'm going to loosen these screws back up. And I'm going to loosen these screws on the side. I've got it, it's a little too grindy. So I didn't do a good job adjusting these. Now it's loose again. We don't want any wobble. Snug these screws back up. Okay, so now it falls down by itself. Okay, so we're going to call that one good. So now that we've got that done, we can mount the mat foot. This takes a 5/64 Allen wrench and these little flathead screws. So this is a one-piece part now. Okay, and just snug those up a little bit. Don't over tighten them. Just snug. Okay. Now we need a 9/64 Allen wrench. So now we'll take our little pin out of here. We'll take this guy, the big gear, and we'll stick it in that hole. Kind of wiggle it around until it goes through. Oh, don't forget, look, we forgot to put that on there. So we need to put this washer on here and put this on. Okay, this is the slot that locks it in place. If we put this on the table so that the slot is up, and then we turn this so the screw is up. Okay, so screw is up, set screw is up, slot is up. Then we need to turn this screw right here with our fingers, holding the gear. Okay, we need to turn that until the flat piece shows up right there, so that hole where this guy goes is up. So this is up, that's up, that's up. Okay, now we put this washer on first, we put the O-ring on next. Now, there's a set screw, there's a hole right there, not right there. This set screw goes in that hole. So we're going to push this on. Now, whenever I turn this, I'm turning the big gear. I'm not holding on to the screw because I don't want to lose the orientation of that hole. So push this back on. Take the 3/32 Allen wrench. Tighten this screw up. It's going to go in that hole, so it's going to go actually below the surface of there, and I want to push that in and out. I'm going to tighten this one. Okay. Okay, so the trick to this is this screw has to go in this hole, and it has to catch the hole that's in the plunger. Remember, I've got this plunger inside this shaft right here, plunger, and I've got to get that pin to catch with that hole. So the way I do that is I push in with my knuckle on this rod. Okay, so I get this started in here like one thread. See, it still moves up and down, and I push in with my knuckle of my left hand. Now it's stuck. I can feel the edge of the plunger. So if I let off on the plunger a little bit and I raise up with my Allen wrench, oh, see there, it let go. Okay, as soon as it lets go, I'm in the hole. So now I just hold everything and screw this in, snug it up. Now I've got a hold of, if I push this in, so that's how that works. It's a little tricky. It takes a little practice to do that. So don't get frustrated if you can't do it the first time as easily as I just did it. Okay. Now we need to put this screw in. On this screw I'm going to use a little red Loctite. So I'm just going to put a little drop of red Loctite on there. Not a lot, just a little drop. And this has got to go in this hole right here. So I'm just going to start it with my fingers. If you put too much on there, you're going to lock up your whole cutting head. So you only want to put a little on there. And you need it to go in about, that far. Okay? So I'm going to put the V-groove switch on. I'm going to put a blade in here on the 4-ply setting. I'm going to put the blade clamp on. Blade clamp is on. Okay, this is the V-groove switch. If I take a little piece of mat board and I hold it on the mat foot and I push out, see right now the tip of the blade is going past the piece of mat board. So I need to screw this in, so clockwise, until it only goes 90% of the way. Because my Loctite isn't dry, I can use my fingers right there. It's just like that, 90% across the bevel. Okay, so that sets the blade depth. Yep, got a little dirt on my tip there. Yep. Back it up. Right there. Okay, so now if I put the V-groove switch off, see the tip goes past that piece of mat board, so I can see it's going to cut through. So now you shouldn't ever have to touch this. You could use the red depth and the V-groove to change the depth of the blade for different kinds of mat board. Okay? Now I'm going to use a ruler, steel ruler, and I'm going to push in on this like so until that screw goes all the way down, and I'm going to look down this edge and I'm going to see what the measurement is. It says it's like 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so if I take this guy and I pull this all the way out and I measure from this surface here to this surface, it should be 5/8 of an inch. Or just a little bit more, and it is. Okay, so I measure from here to here, This should be a little more than 5/8 or a little more than whatever this dimension is when I'm looking down at this. That way this is set at the right place. Okay? So now I can lubricate the gear, the big gear. So I'll take a bunch of grease and put it on my finger. I'll put it in here and I'll just turn the big gear and smear the grease on the teeth like that. And then I'll take a little bit more. I'll put it on my finger and thumb, and I'll just pinch it all around on this pinion gear, and that's all you really need. Okay, now I put this together this way. So this is up, the gear's down, okay? And then you have to adjust your cutting head so that screw lines up with that. And then turn this to get it started. Turn it until they touch. Put your 5/16 wrench on here. Put your 1/2" wrench on here. And lock them up against each other. So now when I turn this, okay, then put this back together. 1/8". Flathead screw. Snug. I'm not tightening them, I'm just putting them in place right now. And then take the ratchet wrench and snug each one a little quarter turn. Not even that, just snug. Okay. Clean all the greasy fingerprints off of it. Put these button head screws back in. They don't go all the way in, they just go in loose. They're just for holding the head cover on. The customer will tighten them. Okay, and let's put the hinges back on since the customer sent it with the hinge. That way he gets his hinges back. I'm just putting them on there loosely because they have to be adjusted when he puts the head back on the machine. Okay, should fall all by itself. Just like that. Okay. Let's take the blade out because the customer doesn't want the blade Snug that back up. Okay, so now this is all serviced. So one of the things I like to do when I service a cutting head is these wires are really small wires. So I like to put on a ferrule. It's a metal tube, and I slide it over the wire. And then I have a crimping tool, and I put the ferrule in the crimping tool and squeeze, and it crimps that on the wire. So then when I put this back in here, the wire is stronger and it can't break. Common problem with machines is wires that are very small breaking. So I'll take this one out, check all the wires, strip it back if I need to. These are actually in pretty good condition, so I'm just twisting them, taking a ferrule, putting it on, making sure all the wires get up in there, crimp it, see how that works. Put that back in, tighten it up. So now I've got a much better connection with the ferrules. So I'll go through and I'll do all of these different size ferrules for different size wires. I'll show you them when I'm done. Okay, so there's the ferrules on each one of those connectors. So that makes a better connector. And that's it. This guy's ready to go back.